A single mother, a mountain of medical bills, and a restaurant check that could change her life. Not because she couldn't pay it, but because the city's most ruthless millionaire, a man who could buy the building with his pocket change, refused to. He thought humiliating a waitress was a sport, a casual display of his power. What he didn't know was that this wasn't just any waitress. She was desperate, she was brilliant, and she had just overheard a secret worth 100 times the bill he so arrogantly tore to pieces. His evening of cruel entertainment was about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. The air in the Gilded Compass was different. It wasn't just filtered, it felt monetized, each molecule scrubbed of city grit and replaced with the faint, expensive scent of lemon oil, old leather, and success. For Leona Reyes, it was the scent of survival. Each shift she spent navigating the maze of linen-draped tables was a tightrope walk over a financial abyss. At 28, Leona possessed a quiet intensity that often went unnoticed in the clamor of the high-end eatery. Her hazel eyes, usually warm and quick to smile, now held a permanent storm cloud of worry. The reason for that storm was named Cody, her 7-year-old brother, a boy with a laugh like wind chimes, and a spirit too bright for the sterile white walls of a hospital room, was fighting a battle he shouldn't have to. A rare autoimmune disorder was attacking his small body, and the only hope was an experimental treatment program with a price tag that looked more like a zip code. So Leona worked. She took every extra shift at the Gilded Compass, a place where patrons wore watches that cost more than her car and discussed multi-million-dollar mergers over their $300 tasting menus. She'd listen with a detached fascination, a sociologist studying a foreign tribe. She memorized their eccentricities. Mrs. Davenport required her water to be precisely 8 degrees Mister. Gable would only use a specific silver fork he brought himself, and the infamous Conrad Beaumont. Well, he was a category unto himself. Conrad Beaumont was a titan of industry, a real estate mogul, whose name was perpetually in the business journals. His face, a mask of chiseled arrogance, and cold, calculating blue eyes, was plastered on billboards for his latest luxury condominium project, Beaumont Pinnacle. In person, he was worse. He didn't just command a room. He choked the air out of it. He treated the staff not as people, but as inconvenient, slow-moving furniture. He was known for his legendary temper, his impossible demands, and his cruel pleasure in finding fault. Tonight, the dreaded reservation was on the books, Beaumont party of one. The junior staff scattered like mice when his name was mentioned. The restaurant's manager, a perpetually sweating man named Mr. Dubois, smoothed his tie for the 10th time. "Leona." Dubois said, his voice a nervous whisper. "You're on Beaumont tonight. You're the best we've got. Poised professional. Don't let him get to you." "Of course, Mr. Dubois." Leona replied, her voice far calmer than she felt. Inside her stomach was a knot of dread. A bad encounter with a regular patron meant a lost tip. A bad encounter with Conrad Beaumont could mean losing her job, the very job that was the thin lifeline keeping Cody's hope afloat. Beaumont arrived exactly at 8 o'clock, not a second sooner or later. He moved with an apex predator's economy of motion, his bespoke charcoal suit hanging perfectly on his broad frame. He didn't wait to be seated. He simply strode to his preferred corner booth, the one with a panoramic view of the city lights, and sat tossing his cashmere coat onto the adjacent seat as if it were a dirty rag. Leona approached her notepad in hand, a placid smile fixed on her face. "Good evening, Mr. Beaumont. Welcome to the Gilded Compass. May I start you with some water? We have still or sparkling?" He didn't look at her. His eyes were scanning the room, appraising, dismissing. "Get me a bottle of the 98 Chateau Margaux, and don't let the sommelier waste my time with his little performance. Just bring it." and it better not be a degree too warm. Of course, Mr. Beaumont, Leona said, her smile not faltering. The entire meal was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The steak ordered rare was practically mooing. He sent it back. The second, he claimed, was tougher than the leather on my shoes. He ate half of it before pushing it away in disgust. He complained that the ambient music was a distraction for simple minds. He snapped his fingers to get her attention, a sound that made Leona's blood run cold every time. Through it all, Leona remained a portrait of serene professionalism. She was a swan, gliding gracefully on the surface, while paddling furiously beneath. She anticipated his needs, replaced his silverware before he could ask, and kept his wine glass perfectly filled. She was doing everything right, but with men like Beaumont, right was a moving target. The real test, she knew, would be the bill. As he finished his dessert, a chocolate lava cake he'd described as pedestrian, before devouring every last crumb, he steepled his fingers, and finally looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time all evening. It was a look of cold, clinical assessment, as if he were calculating her net worth and finding it wanting. It was during this unnerving silence that his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a flicker of something annoyance, then predatory focus crossing his features. He answered his voice, a low, dismissive growl. "What is it? I'm busy." He listened for a moment, his eyes darting around the restaurant. They were empty now, save for one other couple in the far corner. The staff was quietly beginning their closing duties. His voice dropped even lower, but in the hushed, cavernous space, Leona, standing a discreet distance away, could hear every venomous word. "Listen to me and listen carefully," Beaumont hissed into the phone. "The offer is final. 1.2 million for the Cypress Point parcel. Not a penny more. The old fool Henderson doesn't know what he's sitting on. He thinks it's just his worthless little workshop and a plot of weeds. He has no idea about the new zoning permits or the city's infrastructure plan. We have the inside track. The land is worth 10 times that, maybe more, once Titan Tower is announced. So you lean on him. You tell him that offer expires Monday morning, and if he doesn't take it, I'll get the city to condemn the property for eminent domain, and he'll get even less. Understand? Don't fail me." He hung up without a goodbye. A slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. He had just sentenced some old man named Henderson to financial ruin, and it clearly delighted him. Leona felt a prickle of disgust. Cypress Point. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Beaumont looked up, his good mood evaporating, as his eyes landed on her. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "The bill!" he barked. Leona retrieved the leather-bound check folio and placed it gently on the table. The total came to $874.50. For Beaumont, it was nothing. For Leona, a good night's tips might be half that a week's groceries, a fraction of a single hospital copay for Cody. Beaumont opened the folio. He stared at the total for a long, theatrical moment. Then he did something that sucked the air from Leona's lungs. He laughed. It wasn't a sound of joy, but a short, sharp bark of contempt. He took the elegant cream-colored bill, held it between his thumb and forefinger, and ripped it cleanly in half. Then he ripped the halves into quarters. He let the pieces flutter onto the table like malevolent confetti. "The service," he announced to the room, was abysmal. The food was an insult. The entire experience was a waste of my valuable time. I'm not paying for it. Mr. Dubois, who had been watching from afar, scurried over his face, pale and slick with sweat. "Mr. Beaumont, sir, is there a problem? Surely we can offer a dessert, a digestive on the house." Beaumont rose to his full height, looking down at the manager with utter disdain. The problem, Dubois, is that you run a sham of an establishment. And the problem, he added, finally turning his cold gaze back to Leona, is that you hire incompetent staff. She was slow, inattentive, and frankly has the personality of a dish rag. Leona stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every insult was a physical blow. Incompetent, she had run herself ragged for him. Slow, she had anticipated his every whim. "Sir, that is simply not fair," Leona said, her voice trembling but firm. "I provided the best service I possibly could." Beaumont smirked. "Your best isn't worth a dime. Consider this a lesson. Some people are winners in this life, and some are destined to pour water for them. Know your place." He grabbed his cashmere coat, threw a single crisp $100 bill onto the table amidst the shredded pieces of the check, and turned to leave. "For your trouble," he said over his shoulder, not even bothering to look back. "Don't spend it all in one place." He strode out of the restaurant, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Mr. Dubois stared at the confetti of paper on the table, then at Leona, his expression shifting from fear to blame. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I did nothing. He was impossible from the moment he walked in. Conrad Beaumont doesn't just walk out on a check, Leona. You must have provoked him." Dubois' voice rose with panic. He was thinking of his job, his reputation with the owners. The customer especially, a customer like Beaumont, was always right. "The remainder of that bill, it's going to have to come out of your wages for the week." "What?" Leona gasped. "That's over $700. That's illegal." "What's illegal is letting a customer leave this unhappy." Dubois shot back, his face reddening. "Clean up this table, and, Leona, don't bother coming in tomorrow, or ever again. You're fired." The word hit her like a physical blow. Fired. The lifeline was cut. The abyss was no longer beneath her. She was falling. She looked at the single $100 bill on the table, her lesson. It was meant to be the final humiliation, a pittance to underscore her worthlessness in his world. As her world crumbled around her, her mind, sharp and observant, replayed his phone call. Cypress Point, the old fool Henderson, worth 10 times that. Titan Tower. A cold, hard clarity began to cut through her panic. Conrad Beaumont had made a powerful enemy tonight. Not Mr. Dubois, not the restaurant owners. He had made an enemy of a desperate woman with nothing left to lose. A woman who had just been handed a weapon she didn't even know she had. He thought he was teaching her a lesson. Leona Reyes was about to teach him one. The walk home from the Gilded Compass felt like traversing a foreign country. The familiar city blocks, usually a backdrop to her tired thoughts about tips and Cody's next doctor's appointment, now seemed hostile and alien. The glittering lights of downtown mocked her. Each luxury car that swished past on the wet pavement felt like a personal insult. Fired. The word echoed with the rhythm of her footsteps. Her apartment was small on the 3rd floor of a walk-up that always smelled faintly of garlic and damp laundry. It was home. It was the safe harbor she and Cody had built after their parents had passed away years ago, leaving Leona, then just 19, as the sole guardian for her younger brother. She pushed the door open to a silence that felt heavier than usual. Her neighbor, Mrs. Petrova, a kind old woman who watched Cody when Leona worked late, had already put him to bed. A note on the kitchen table read, "He was a brave boy today. Ate all his soup. Kisses, Eleanor." Leona's composure held together by sheer willpower, since the moment Beaumont had ripped that bill finally shattered. She sank onto a kitchen chair, the note trembling in her hand, and let the tears come. They weren't loud, hiccuping sobs, but silent hot tears of rage and despair. $774. That was her rent for the month. Gone. Her job Gone. The bridge to Cody's treatment. Gone. She felt the $100 bill in her pocket. Beaumont's lesson. She pulled it out and stared at it. It was a symbol of his power, of the casual cruelty he wielded like a scepter. For a moment, she wanted to rip it to shreds, just as he had done to the bill. But she couldn't. It was still $100. It was medicine. It was food. After the tears subsided, a cold, quiet anger began to crystallize in her heart. It was the anger of the powerless, the righteous fury of the wronged. She made herself a cup of tea, her hands still shaking, and sat at her small, cluttered desk. Her old law school textbooks, remnants of a dream she'd had to put on hold, were piled in the corner. She'd always had a sharp, analytical mind, a mind for details and connections. Know your place, Beaumont had said. Leona's place right now was at this desk, with a steaming mug and a flickering laptop screen. The anger was coiling into something else now focus. Cypress Point. She typed the words into the search engine. The first few results were for a landscaping company and a dental clinic. She refined the search. Cypress Point Property Development. Bingo. An article from the city's business journal dated 3 weeks ago. The headline read, Beaumont Corps eyes Cypress Point for new Titan Tower project. The article was speculative, talking about a massive mixed-use skyscraper that would reshape the city's skyline. It mentioned that Beaumont Corp was in the process of acquiring the necessary land parcels in a neglected industrial zone known as Cypress Point. It was touted as a revitalization project that would bring jobs and prestige to the city. The article ended with a quote from Conrad Beaumont himself. We believe in fair and transparent dealings to build a better future for this great city. Leona snorted the sound harsh in the quiet room. Fair and transparent dealings. The hypocrisy was staggering. Henderson. She searched again. Henderson Cypress Point. This was more difficult. It was a common name. She tried to remember Beaumont's exact words. His worthless little workshop. She added workshop to the search query. And there it was, a small, almost invisible mention on a local community forum from a few years back. A post about a craftsman who specialized in restoring antique furniture. Anyone know a good furniture restorer? My grandma's rocking chair is falling apart. A reply. You have to go see old Mr. Henderson at his workshop on Cypress Point. A true artist. Henderson's Restoration. He's been there forever. Henderson's Restoration. Leona's heart began to beat faster. She searched for the business name. A simple, outdated website popped up with a single address and a phone number. 4 Irena, Cypress Point Lane. Leona leaned back, her mind racing, connecting the dots. Beaumont's secret lowball offer. The threat of using eminent domain. The worthless workshop that was sitting on a gold mine. The public face of a city benefactor versus the private reality of a ruthless predator. But who was Mr. Henderson? The name still tugged at her memory. He's been there forever. She thought back not to the sterile halls of the Gilded Compass, but further back to her first waitressing job at a cozy little place called the Corner Bistro. It was a family-run diner where the regulars were treated like royalty. She'd worked there for 5 years before it closed down, the owners retiring. There was an old man who used to come in every Thursday for the meatloaf special. A quiet, gentle man with hands stained by wood varnish and a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He always left a generous tip and would sometimes bring her a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. He told her he had a workshop. He told her his name was George Henderson. It couldn't be. Her hands flew across the keyboard. She searched for George Henderson's Restoration. An old, small business spotlight article from a local paper appeared complete with a photo. There he was, the same kind eyes, the same gentle smile, a little older, a little more weathered, standing proudly in front of a cluttered workshop. It was him, the man who had shown her kindness, who represented a simpler, more decent world than the one she now inhabited. The disgust she felt for Beaumont curdled into a protective rage. This wasn't just an abstract injustice anymore. This was personal. Beaumont wasn't just cheating some faceless old fool. He was trying to destroy a good man, a man who had shown her kindness. A plan audacious and terrifying began to form in her mind. It was a long shot, a desperate gambit. But what other choice did she have? She was unemployed. She was facing a mountain of debt, and she had knowledge that could blow Conrad Beaumont's world apart. His mistake wasn't just in underestimating her. His mistake was in being cruel, loud and arrogant while doing his dirty work. He had provided her with all the ammunition she needed. The first step was to confirm everything. She needed proof. An overheard conversation wasn't enough. She needed to talk to Mr. Henderson. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Leona dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, a far cry from the starched uniform of the Gilded Compass. She took a bus to the industrial outskirts of the city, an area of low-slung warehouses and chain-link fences. Cypress Point Lane was a dusty, forgotten street. At the very end of it, just as the old website had promised, was a weathered brick building with a faded hand-painted sign that read, "Henderson's Restoration." She took a deep breath and knocked on the large, sliding wooden door. After a moment, it creaked open, and George Henderson stood there, wiping his hands on a rag. He squinted at her. "Leona, is that you, child, from the bistro?" Relief washed over her. "Mr. Henderson, yes, it's me. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Nonsense, nonsense, come in," he said, his face breaking into that familiar, kind smile. "What brings you all the way out here?" The workshop was a wonderland of wood and tools. The air smelled of sawdust and varnish and history. Leona looked around at the beautiful half-finished pieces of furniture, each one being brought back to life by his skilled hands. "Actually, sir," Leona began, her voice steady, "I came to talk to you about your property here, about an offer from a man named Conrad Beaumont." The smile on George Henderson's face vanished. A shadow of weariness and worry fell over him. How would you know about that?" And so Leona told him everything. She told him about her job, about the arrogant billionaire, the ripped-up check, and the overheard phone call. As she spoke, she watched Mr. Henderson's shoulders slump. "They offered me $1.2 million, he said, his voice heavy. It seemed like so much money. "My wife, she passed 2 years ago, and business has been slow. I thought maybe it was time to retire, to sell this old place. Their lawyers, they were very aggressive. They said the city was planning to rezone, that I should take the offer before the land became worthless." "Mr. Henderson," Leona said, her voice filled with a conviction that surprised even herself, "they're lying to you. This land isn't worthless. It's the future site of the Titan Tower. It's worth a fortune. He's trying to steal it from you." The old man stared at her, his eyes wide, with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. "Steal it?" "Yes," Leona said, her own plan solidifying with every word. "And I think I know how we can stop him." She wasn't just a fired waitress anymore. She was an advocate, she had a client, and her fee was going to be justice. Justice, Leona quickly realized, was not a dish best served cold. It was a dish that required a detailed recipe, the right ingredients, and a kitchen full of allies. A fired waitress and an elderly woodworker, no matter how righteous their cause, were no match for the legal army of Beaumont Corp. She needed more than just a plan. She needed leverage. Her first call was not to a lawyer. Lawyers cost money, a resource she had in critically short supply. Her first call was to a different kind of advocate, a man who traded in the currency of information and public opinion. Frank Miller. Frank was a journalist of the old school. He worked for the City Chronicle, a digital-first, but stubbornly print-surviving newspaper that had seen better days. Frank was rumpled, perpetually caffeinated, and possessed a bloodhound's nose for sniffing out the hypocrisy of the rich and powerful. He and Leona had a passing acquaintance. He'd been a regular at the same diner as Mr. Henderson and had always appreciated Leona's no-nonsense efficiency. He'd once written a scathing exposé on a city councilman's shady zoning deals, a story that had cost him sources, but earned him a reputation for being fearless. She met him at a greasy spoon downtown, a world away from the gilded compass. The air was thick with the smell of frying bacon, and the coffee was cheap and strong. Frank slid into the booth opposite her, his reporter's notebook already open. "Leona," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "Your message sounded urgent. What's the story?" Leona laid it all out. The scene at the restaurant, Beaumont's arrogance, the ripped check, the overheard phone call, word for word, as she'd memorized it. Then she told him about George Henderson, the beloved craftsman, being strong-armed into selling his legacy for a pittance. Frank listened intently, his pen occasionally scratching a note. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. When she finished, he leaned back, taking a long sip of his coffee. Conrad Beaumont. He mused, a grim smile touching his lips. The white whale. I've been trying to get something solid on that guy for years. He's slippery. Surrounds himself with a wall of lawyers and PR flacks. Everything is always alleged or unsubstantiated. "This isn't unsubstantiated, Frank," Leona said, leaning forward, her voice low and urgent. "I heard him. He admitted it. He knows the land is worth a fortune because of insider knowledge about city permits and the Titan Tower project. He is actively defrauding an elderly man. It's still your word against his kid. A classic he said she said scenario. His lawyers would paint you as a disgruntled fired employee looking for revenge or a payday. So we get more, Leona pressed. We dig. You're a reporter. You have resources. Can you find out about the city's infrastructure plan for Cypress Point? Can you confirm the timeline for the zoning changes? If we can prove Beaumont had access to that information before it was public, we have him." Frank looked at her, a newfound respect dawning in his eyes. This wasn't just a vengeful waitress. She was smart, strategic. She was thinking like an investigator. "That's a tall order," he said, though a glint of excitement was visible. "The city planning department is a fortress of bureaucracy, but I have a source, a clerk, who owes me a favor. A big one. Let me make some calls. No promises." "That's all I'm asking for," Leona said. While Frank began his digging, Leona focused on her own front. She went back to Mr. Henderson's workshop, not just as a supporter, but as a strategist. "Mr. Henderson," she said, sitting with him amidst the comforting clutter of his life's work. "The men from Beaumont Corp. Did you sign anything?" "Just a preliminary letter of intent," he said, pulling a document from a dusty filing cabinet. "My eyesight isn't what it used to be. Their lawyer said it was just a formality to lock in the price." Leona's heart sank as she took the papers, but as she read the fine print, her dormant legal training kicked in. The document was shrewdly worded, but contained a crucial clause. "This offer is contingent upon a final review and signature by both parties within 10 business days." They were on day 7. We have 3 days. Leona said, a surge of adrenaline cutting through her fear. They told you the offer expires Monday morning to pressure you. We need to stall. Her plan was twofold. First, they needed to create a paper trail that showed Mr. Henderson was not a willing, informed seller. With Leona's help, he drafted a formal letter to Beaumont Corp's legal department. It was polite but firm, stating that he was seeking independent counsel to review the offer and required a formal appraisal of the property before proceeding. Leona made sure he sent it via registered mail, requiring a signature upon receipt. It was a small act of defiance, but a legally significant one. Second, Leona knew they needed to quantify the true value of the land. She spent an entire day at the city's public records office, poring over property tax assessments, recent commercial sales in adjacent zones, and zoning application templates. She compiled a dossier, a thick folder of maps, charts, and figures that suggested the land, if rezoned for high-density commercial use, wasn't worth $1.2 million, but closer to $15 million, maybe even $20 million. 2 days later, Frank called. His voice was electric. "You were right, Leona. You were 100% right," he said. "My source came through. It was buried deep, but I got it. A draft of the Northeast Corridor Revitalization Plan. It reroutes a major transit line and designates Cypress Point as a priority development zone." And guess who was on the confidential advisory board that drafted the plan 6 months ago? "Let me guess," Leona said, her heart pounding. "Conrad Beaumont," Frank confirmed. He had full knowledge. He used his position on a civic board to get insider information and is now using it to fleece a private citizen. This is more than unethical. It's a criminal abuse of power. "Do you have the documents?" "I have copies," Frank said. "This is the smoking gun. This is the story of a lifetime." "No," Leona said, her voice suddenly ice cold. "Not yet." "What are you talking about?" Frank sputtered. "We have to publish this. We can blow him out of the water." "If you publish it now, he gets buried in bad press, sure." Leona explained, her mind working furiously. "His lawyers will release a statement he'll step down from the board. The Titan Tower project might get delayed. But what happens to Mr. Henderson? The land will be tied up in litigation for years. He'll be lucky to see a dime. Beaumont will take the PR hit. But in the end, he'll still have his millions. He won't have learned a thing." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "So what's your play?" Frank asked, his tone now one of pure curiosity. "Beaumont doesn't respect the press," Leona said. "He respects power and money. So we're not going to go to the public with this story. We're going to go to him." Her plan was audacious. It was dangerous. It was about turning Beaumont's own tactics against him. He used leverage and threats. So would they. "Here's what we're going to do." Leona began laying out her strategy for Frank. "You're going to write the article, every last detail. The insider knowledge, the lowball, offer the threat of eminent domain. Include quotes from a concerned source inside the planning department. Mention George Henderson by name as the victim. Make it explosive. And then you're going to send a draft of that article directly to Conrad Beaumont's personal email." Frank was silent for a moment, processing the sheer audacity of the move. It was journalistic blackmail. "And what do I ask for?" Frank finally said, a slow grin spreading across his face as he understood. "Not money, I hope." "No," Leona said. "Nothing for you, nothing for me. We're going to set the terms of his surrender, and the price of his silence is going to be much, much higher than a restaurant bill. They had the weapon. They had the ammunition. Now all that was left was to pull the trigger. The world from the 62nd floor of the Beaumont Pinnacle was not made of people but of patterns. From his throne-like leather chair, Conrad Beaumont surveyed the city not as a citizen, but as a chess master surveys his board. The streams of traffic were his gambits, the sprawling parks his captured territory, the rising skeletons of new buildings his advancing pawns. His mornings were a sacrament of power. He would drink his precisely brewed Kona coffee, absorb the overnight market reports from Asia with a predator's focus, and issue a series of brief, brutal directives to subordinates who knew better than to question him. Control was his religion, and this office was his cathedral. It was a Friday, exactly 1 week after the satisfyingly unpleasant dinner at the Gilded Compass, when a discordant note appeared in his symphony of control. An email materialized in his personal inbox, an encrypted address reserved for his most senior counsel and his offshore banker. The subject line was offensively direct: "Draft for your review. The Titan and the Carpenter." The sender was Frank Miller, a name he vaguely associated with the City Chronicle, a journalistic gnat he had swatted away on previous occasions. Beaumont's first impulse was to delete it. He did not engage with pests, but the audacity of it, the use of his private email, sparked a flicker of cold curiosity. He clicked it open, a condescending smirk on his lips, ready to forward it to his legal team with the single-word instruction, "Crush." As his eyes scanned the first few lines of the attached document, the smirk vanished. The words on the screen were not the typical speculative drivel of a desperate reporter. They were hard, specific, and terrifyingly accurate. The article detailed the Northeast Corridor revitalization plan with an insider's fluency. It mentioned his role on the confidential advisory board. It named names, quoted dates, cited internal memo numbers. The air in the hermetically sealed office suddenly felt thin. A cold knot of dread began to form in his stomach, a foreign sensation he hadn't felt since his brutal climb out of poverty decades ago. He read on his pulse, quickening. The story pivoted to a neglected industrial zone called Cypress Point, to a small business owner, an elderly woodworker named George Henderson, to a grossly undervalued offer of $1.2 million, to the explicit threat of using eminent domain. It was all there, his entire strategy laid bare with clinical precision. Miller even had quotes attributed to a concerned source deep within the city planning department that confirmed Beaumont had used his position to obtain privileged information. Beaumont felt a suffocating pressure in his chest, as if the thick plate glass of his window were pressing inward. This wasn't a story, it was an indictment. If this ran Titan Tower, the crowning achievement of his career would become a toxic asset overnight. His investors' men as ruthless as himself would scatter like roaches in the light. There would be investigation subpoenas, a full-scale demolition of the pristine public image he had spent millions to construct. He scrolled to the bottom of the email, his hand trembling slightly, searching for the reporter's demands. But there were none. Only a single, chillingly polite sentence. "Mr. Beaumont, my source for this story, has requested a single opportunity to speak with you in person before we go to print. She will be in the lobby of your building at 12:00 p.m. today. Her name is Leona Reyes." Leona Reyes, the name detonated in his mind, instantly connecting the catastrophic document on his screen with the memory of a quiet waitress and a torn-up check. The woman he had dismissed as a dish rag. The insignificant employee he had casually humiliated and had fired. It was impossible. It was inconceivable that the two were connected. The sheer cosmic irony of it was staggering. He had wielded his power for a moment of cruel sport, and in doing so had handed his enemy the very weapon that now threatened to slit his throat. His arrogance hadn't just been a character flaw, it had been a tactical blunder of catastrophic proportions. He slammed his fist on the mahogany desk. He grabbed his phone and speed-dialed his head of legal. "Paulson, I need to know everything we have on a reporter named Frank Miller and a woman named Leona Reyes. Now." He paced the length of his office, a caged tiger whose bars had suddenly materialized around him. The view of his kingdom now seemed to mock him. He was no longer its master. He was a target. His lawyer's voice, when he called back minutes later, was laced with a professional panic Conrad had never heard before. "Sir Miller is a bulldog. He has a history of taking on City Hall. As for the woman, Leona Reyes, she was terminated from the Gilded Compass last Friday. The manager and Mr. Dubois filed a report. It was the night you were there." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He had done this to himself. "She's downstairs," Conrad growled into the phone. "She's coming up. Sir, I strongly advise against—" "I'm not asking for your advice, Paulson. I'm telling you what's happening." He had to see her. He had to look this ghost in the eye to understand how a nobody could orchestrate such a perfect attack. He needed to find a weakness, a crack in her armor he could exploit. He still believed on some fundamental level that everyone had a price. At precisely 12:00 p.m., his private elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open, and Leona Reyes stepped out. She was not the cowed, nervous server he remembered. She wore a simple black pantsuit that fit her perfectly, her hair pulled back in a severe professional bun. There was nothing in her hands, no purse, no briefcase. Her entire presence was one of absolute, unburdened focus. She walked across the Persian silk rug as if she belonged there, her gaze fixed only on him. She did not glance at the priceless art on the walls or the breathtaking panorama of the city. To her, they were irrelevant props. Beaumont remained seated behind his vast desk, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of power. "You," was all he could manage the word, a guttural mix of accusation and disbelief. "Me," Leona replied. Her voice was the same quiet timbre he remembered, but it was now stripped of all deference. It was as cool and solid as the marble in the lobby. "I believe you received my colleague's email. We felt it was only proper to give you the chance to comment before publication." The word colleague was a deliberate professional jab that tightened the knot in his gut. "This is blackmail," he snarled, finally finding his voice, his rage surging past his shock. He slapped the printout of Frank's article on his desk. "You and that parasite reporter think you can extort me. Do you have any idea who I am? I will sue you into oblivion. I'll buy that pathetic newspaper just to shut it down, and I'll make sure you are blacklisted from ever sweeping floors in this city again." He was on his feet now, bellowing his face, turning a blotchy red. He expected her to flinch, to crumble. Instead, Leona simply watched him, her expression unchanging, as if observing a toddler's tantrum. She waited until his tirade sputtered out into heavy breathing. "You already made sure I wouldn't work in this city again, remember?" she said, her voice never rising. "At the Gilded Compass. In a way, I should thank you. You freed up my schedule. As for this being blackmail, you'll find we're not asking you for a single cent for ourselves. Blackmail is for personal gain. This," she said, taking a step closer to the desk, "is a settlement offer. It's an opportunity for you to correct a series of mistakes before they become a public catastrophe." "A mistake?" he boomed. "I make deals, I build things, that's what I do." "You commit fraud," Leona corrected him, her voice cutting through his bluster like a surgeon's scalpel. "You used a position of public trust to enrich yourself at the expense of a good and decent man. You call it a deal. Frank Miller calls it a front-page story. The district attorney, I imagine, will have a few other names for it. Racketeering, conspiracy, insider trading. Shall I go on?" Each word was a precise, calculated blow. He sank back into his leather chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by the cold, stark reality of his position. He was trapped. This woman, this waitress, had him. "What do you want?" He finally bit out the words, tasting like ash and surrender. Leona moved to his desk and placed a simple manila folder on top of the damning article. She opened it. Inside were two neatly prepared documents. "This," she said, her finger tapping the first one, "is a new purchase agreement for the property at 14 Cypress Point Lane. The buyer is Beaumont Corp. The seller is Mr. George Henderson. The purchase price," she paused for a beat, letting the moment hang in the air, "is $15 million. Beaumont felt the air leave his lungs. 15. That's preposterous. The land isn't worth a third of that. It's a conservative estimate of its fair market value, given what you know it will be worth once Titan Tower is built. It's the price you would have had to pay if you'd been an honest man. You will sign it. Today." Her gaze was unblinking. She then shifted her finger to the second document. It was an official pledge form for the City Children's Hospital Foundation. "And this," she continued, a hard edge creeping into her voice for the first time, "is a donation pledge. You are going to make an unrestricted anonymous donation of $2 million to the hospital's experimental treatment fund." The anonymity was the final, exquisite turn of the knife. It denied him even the public relations victory of a grand philanthropic gesture. It was a silent, punitive tax on his soul. He stared from the documents to Leona's impassive face. He was a master of finding leverage, of sniffing out a person's weakness. But looking at her, he found nothing. No greed, no fear, no vanity, just an iron wall of resolve. "And if I do this," he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper, "the story vanishes." "Mr. Miller is a man of his word," Leona said. "He is interested in justice, not just headlines. If justice is served, the story becomes moot. The Titan and the Carpenter come to a fair and equitable agreement. It's a non-story. And you—" He couldn't stop himself from asking, his voice dripping with venomous curiosity. "What do you get out of this Akate finder's fee from the old man?" For the first time, the corner of Leona's mouth turned up in a small, cold smile that did not reach her eyes. "What I get, Mr. Beaumont, is the profound satisfaction of proving you wrong. A week ago, you told me to know my place. I've decided my place is to ensure that powerful men like you are held accountable for their actions. You felt my service. My dignity was worth less than your dinner. You're about to pay $17 million to correct your assessment." She reached across the vast expanse of polished mahogany and slid a single elegant fountain pen towards him. It came to a stop directly in front of his hand. "You have 1 hour to have your lawyers review these and execute the wire transfers. We will require confirmation from Mr. Henderson and the hospital. If it is not received by 3 p.m., Frank Miller publishes his article at 3:01 p.m. The choice is yours." Without another word, Leona Reyes turned and walked out of his office. Her footsteps were silent on the priceless rug, her posture as straight and unyielding as a steel rod. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The king had been checkmated in his own castle, left alone, with nothing but a pen, 2 documents, and the ruins of his own arrogance. Conrad Beaumont did not wait 1 hour. He called his legal team his voice, a furious, clipped command. They screamed, they blustered, they threatened lawsuits, but the logic was inescapable. The documents Frank Miller possessed were authentic and radioactive. A $17 million loss was a flesh wound. The public scandal would be a kill shot. Within 45 minutes, the signed papers were in a courier's pouch, speeding away from the Beaumont pinnacle. Conrad sat alone in his office as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across his silent kingdom. He had lost. He who had never lost anything had been comprehensively outmaneuvered by a waitress. The monetary loss was galling, but it was the nature of his defeat that truly ate at him. She hadn't screamed or cried. She had been clinical, strategic, and correct. She had used his own rules of leverage and power against him, and won. The humiliation was a deeper wound than any financial statement could reflect. His office door opened, and his daughter Brenda walked in. She was a sharp, MBA-educated woman in her late 20s, whom Conrad was grooming to one day take over. He had always tried to instill in her his own killer instinct. "Dad," she said, holding a tablet, "what is this emergency wire transfer to the Children's Hospital for $2 million? And legal just sent me a purchase agreement for a Cypress Point property for $15 million. The budget was $2 million max. Is this a mistake?" Conrad couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared out the window. "It's not a mistake. It's the new cost of doing business." Brenda looked at him, her brow furrowed. She had heard the whispers from the legal department, the frantic, hushed conversations. She saw the defeated slump of her father's shoulders, a posture she had never witnessed before. For the first time, she saw not a titan, but a bully who had been punched in the mouth. And in that moment, the admiration she had always held for his power curdled into something else. Disappointment. Meanwhile, across town, in a dusty workshop, George Henderson stared at a purchase agreement with a number on it that made his old eyes water. $15 million. He looked at Leona, who was sitting with him, nursing a cup of tea. I don't know what to say, child." He stammered, his voice thick with emotion. It's a dream. You're a miracle worker." "You deserve it, Mr. Henderson," Leona said warmly. "You built a life's work on this land. It's only right that you're compensated for its true worth." He shook his head, a tear tracing a path through the sawdust on his cheek. "It's not about the money. It's that you stood up for me. You believed in me." He reached out with a trembling, varnish-stained hand and patted hers. "What can I ever do to repay you?" Leona smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that had been absent for weeks. "Just promise me you'll finally take that trip to see the redwoods you always talked about, at the bistro." Her final stop of the day was the hospital. She walked through the familiar antiseptic-smelling halls, but today they didn't feel like a place of fear. They felt like a place of hope. She found Cody in the children's playroom, meticulously building a tower out of blocks. She knelt down beside him. "Hey, buddy." "Leo," he chirped, his face lighting up. "Look, I'm building a skyscraper." Leona felt a lump form in her throat. "I saw your doctor today, Cody," she said softly. "Dr. Matthews. She told me some really good news. There was a big anonymous donation made to the hospital, a huge one, and it means they have all the funding they need to start your new treatment. Right away." Cody's eyes went wide. "Really, for real?" "For real," Leona said, her voice breaking as she pulled him into a fierce hug. "Everything is going to be okay." She held her little brother, breathing in the scent of his hair, and felt the crushing weight she had carried for so long finally lift. She had done it. Weeks turned into months. The Titan Tower project proceeded, but under a cloud of scrutiny. Conrad Beaumont became more withdrawn, his reputation for ruthlessness now tinged with the rumor of a great unexplained defeat. His daughter Brenda took on more responsibility at the company, but her approach was different, more cautious, more ethical, as if trying to scrub away a stain she couldn't see, but knew was there. Mr. Henderson sold his workshop and bought a small, beautiful house with a garden for his retirement. The first postcard Leona received was from Redwood National Park. Leona never worked as a waitress again. With the immediate financial pressure gone, she re-enrolled in law school, attending classes at night. She used part of the settlement money Mr. Henderson had insisted she take to pay her tuition. She found she had a passion for contract law and a fierce desire to advocate for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She had walked into the Gilded Compass as a survivor, just trying to stay afloat. She walked out a warrior. Conrad Beaumont had ripped up a check for $874, $50, to teach her a lesson about power. Instead, Leona Reyes had handed him a bill for $17 million and taught him a lesson about justice. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a clever trick or a millionaire's regret. It's a powerful reminder that integrity, intelligence, and courage are forms of wealth that can't be bought or bullied. Leona didn't have money or status, but she had a brilliant mind and a righteous heart. She proved that one person armed with the truth can challenge the most imposing towers of power and win. She didn't just get revenge. She secured a future for her brother, saved an honest man from ruin, and discovered her own true calling in the process. If you were moved by Leona's incredible courage and cleverness, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that the underdog can have the sharpest bite. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories where justice finds a way. Thank you for listening.